start off with bill introductions. Representative Schreiber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to introduce a bill concerning, excuse me, I just took 5 flights and out of air. Transportation of radioactive materials through the state. It's a fee bill. I'm a member of the Midwest Radioactive Materials Transportation Committee, and Kansas is one of the states that doesn't have a fee structure right now. So this would be could be for spent nuclear fuel, it could be other radioactive materials, excuse me. But it's kind of a starting process, and the fees would be used for emergency, excuse me, emergency response, training and that sort of thing. And the RS number is 2859.
Are there any questions? Is there objection? Hearing no objection, the bill is introduced. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Blex.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'd like to introduce 22 RS 2543. 2543 on the last. It would be an act concerning motor vehicles allowing for a distinctive license plate. This would provide for 4 distinctive license plates for Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks. And I'd like to introduce this as a committee bill and on behalf of Kansas Wildlife and Parks. I'll stand for any questions.
Are there questions? Hearing none, is there objection? Hearing no objection, the bill is introduced. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Recognize Holly Schletzbaum. Welcome to the committee.
Let's see, is it on? Okay, thank you, Chairman. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Holly Schletzbaum, and I'm here on behalf of Hop Skip Drive. And I would like to request the introduction of RS 2870, a bill related to transport of students by transportation network companies.
Are there questions? Say none. Is there objection? Hearing no objection, the bill is introduced. Thank you. Vice Chair Delperdang.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to introduce a bill concerning antique automobiles and relating to the VIN or vehicle identification numbers. It's 22 RS 2872. I'll stand for any questions.
Are there questions? Hearing none, is there objection? Hearing no objection, it is introduced. Does anyone else have a bill to introduce today? Seeing none, I have one. It has to do with using the bill of sale to apply for a certificate of title, changing from vehicles 1950 and before to 1960 and before. It's 22 RS 2911. Does anyone have any questions? Hearing none, is there objection? Hearing no objection, the bill is introduced. Committee will move forward and open the hearing on Senate Bill 101. Revisor Wagner, would you brief us on it, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee, Senate Bill 101 should look fairly familiar to you. It amends the definition of electric-assisted bicycles and provides for the regulation improved use of those e-bikes. Starting with sections 1 and related to section 7, provides a new definition for electric-assisted bicycles. Does away with the former limits and instead replaces that definition to mean any e-bike would have a motor of less than 750 watts. That meets the definition of any of the 3 new classes that are created. Just generally, class 1 is a pedal-only e-assistance, and the assistance stops at 20 miles per hour. A Class 2 would be motor propelled that stops at 20 miles per hour. The assistance stops at 20 miles per hour. And then a Class 3 would be a pedal only e-assistance with that assistance stopping at 28 miles per hour. Section 2 would exempt these vehicles from having to be registered. Sections 3, 6, 8, 10, and 11 just exempt electric assisted bicycles from the definition of certain other types of vehicles. Section 9, beginning at the bottom of page 8, going into page 9, are kind of the more substantive changes. It amends the current statute governing the use of these e-bikes. Currently, they're not required to get registered, or operators are not required to possess a driver's license. And traffic regulations applicable to bicycles currently apply to electric assisted bicycles, and that will remain unchanged. The bill goes on to provide that e-bikes are afforded the same rights and privileges and subject to the same duties as bicycle riders. And additionally, the rider shall not be required to maintain vehicle liability insurance, possess a driver's license, register the vehicle, obtain a certificate of title, or possess a license plate for the vehicle. Section 9 provides some other requirements for electric assisted bicycles, including the manufacturers are required to put a label on the bike that contains the classification number and the top assisted speed and motor wattage. It would prohibit tampering with the e-bike that changes the motor-powered speed capability unless a new classification label is replaced after the modification. The bill requires that an electric-assisted bicycle comply with manufacturing requirements adopted by the United States Consumer Product Safety Commission. It requires operators to operate the bike in a manner so that it requires the bike to operate in a manner that the motor disengages or ceases to function. Brakes are applied. And the bill provides an to streets, highways, roadways, bicycle lanes, and paths and trails or trail networks. The bill was amended in the Senate to clarify that these new provisions do not prohibit a city from adopting ordinances governing the operation of e-bikes on streets and sidewalks that are under the city's jurisdiction. Similarly, a municipality, county, or agency may restrict or prohibit the operation of e-bikes on bicycle paths or trail networks that are under that entity's jurisdiction. Finally, the bill prohibits persons under 16 from operating a Class 3 e-bike, and that a Class 3 must have a speedometer equipped on it. And with that, I'd be happy to stand with it. Oh, just as one more general note, this bill is the exact same as House Bill 2263 that passed out of this committee, including that additional language that the Senate amended into Senate Bill 101 also. So just wanted to note that. And it is a holdover bill, so some technical updates would be required.
Other questions? Vice Chair Delperdang.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Originally, I was going to ask you it talks about the manufacturers and distributors on page 9. I was going to just ask you for a description of distributor, but it provides it on page 12. Any person who sells or distributes for resale the bicycles. So I'm curious on page 9, line 3, why the manufacturers and the distributors have to affix this label. Is there a difference between the two since both have to do it?
I don't think there's a difference between the two. I would think it's just under the responsibility for both to make sure that that label is placed.
Is it requiring 2 labels, or do we need to have that changed when we work the thing to make sure one of them gets it done?
Yeah, it doesn't require 2 labels. It requires both. As we've said, sometimes and can mean and or in our drafting. So in this instance, it might be or, but I think it covers both. Just one label is required.
Okay. And then on same page down on line 9, person shall not tamper with or modify an electric assisted bicycle in any manner it changes the motor speed. If they do, is there any penalty laid out?
There is no penalty contemplated in the bill. No, there isn't a penalty on this bill.
Theoretically, I could change the government speed on it, and shouldn't do that, but oh well. So, okay, thank you.
Representative Weigel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Expounding a little bit on my colleagues here, who exactly would have to put the label on there if the engine is modified, or in the vernacular, if it's souped up more than what the label says? Who actually has to put that label or update that label? Who actually does that?
It would be up to the person who tampers or modifies with the electric assisted bicycle.
So the owner, the person that ends up with it and is doing that would have to do it.
Yeah, any subsequent label would be on the person modifying, so the owner.
And,
Unless they take it into a shop, obviously, then.
and expounding a little bit more on that, what exactly would the label have to say if they upgraded the engine or the motor?
I would require the same information that the current label would require, so the classification number, the top assisted speed, and the motor wattage of the bike.
And there's no penalty if they don't comply with that.
Not as the bill is written, no.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further questions, comments?
Mr. Chair, this is Representative Jacobs, please.
Yes, Representative Jacobs.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chris, on page 10, line 3 through 6, talks about individuals. I think this was hit just a moment ago. No individuals under the age of 16 may operate a Class 3 electric assisted bicycle or person, and you can read the rest of it. On page 8, flashing back for a moment, lines 22 through 25, it gives a classification or a definition of Class 3, that it's a bicycle that reaches the speed of 28 miles per hour. Now we're making this against law for 16-year-olds to ride these bicycles, but what is the top speed of a moped or a dirt bike or a little kit car versus that? And children under 16 can ride those as much as they like, right?
I would probably have to look up that exact question and get an answer back to you.
Okay. And just a follow up, what is the wattage of a 28 mile per hour Class 3 bicycle?
Under the new definition that for electric assisted bicycle, the Class 3 would still have to be less than 750 watts for the motor.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sure. Anyone else online have a question? See none? Thank you, Chris. Move on to our proponents. First proponent is Gary Robbins, Government Affairs Consultant for a Folston Law Firm. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, committee members, for hearing this bill again. One of the things that I want to be sure that is clear as we start this process, we want to be, this is a national effort, and this is the manufacturers, the distributors, and the retailers. We represent over 300 of them that are trying to be sure that the consumer knows what product they're buying, that it's clearly labeled, and they know that it meets standards. We're trying to manufacture and be sure that the standards are the same, whether you buy a bike, whether it's manufactured in Europe or whether it's manufactured in the United States. So that's part of what we're doing in terms of this effort. As Chris pointed out, this bill should be familiar to you. And we do appreciate this committee passing last session House Bill 2263. It didn't reach the House floor. We had introduced a version in the Senate, Senate Bill 101. It has identical language as what you approved in House Bill 2263. And it does include the amendment that we worked out with the League of Kansas Municipalities. And the bill passed the Senate 36-3 as we went into it. One of the things that we're doing in this process is trying to be sure that the electric bicycles are recognized in statutes. These have been around for over 20 years. They're nothing new. They have been around, but becoming more popular. And one of the things is that we want to be sure that we have uniform state laws in terms of being able to be sure that the consumer knows exactly what they're buying, how fast it's going to go, what the requirements are to do it. So we're trying to standardize. It is the electric bikes, they do offer substantial health, recreational, and also transportation. They are convenient for short trips, who may have a health problem or who are a little older to be able to continue to exercise and be able to enjoy a form of activity that allows them to participate with other family members of the family. The other thing that I think is really important that we talked about is the labeling, and that's something are, so we recognize the technology that's here in Kansas. One of the things that has changed since we were in front of you last session that I think is very important is the fact there's 28 states that have passed this legislation. There's now 36, so another 8 states that passed the legislation since we were in front of you last year. Ashley Lavelle has submitted testimony to you as well, and she had a conflict and couldn't be with us this afternoon. But I wanted to highlight a few things in her testimony for you in terms of the technology piece, to be sure that these are, the terminology is consistent with these as you go from state law to state law. It's easy when a consumer buys one, where can I ride this? So it's regulated and people know what's possible. She highlights again, as Chris, I think, did an excellent job, all of the 36 states have the 3 classes. It's limited to the 3 classes that we talked about. The class 1, you're pedaling, and you have to be pedaling for the motor to engage, and it's limited to 20 miles an hour. The class 2 is assisted bike that can go 20 miles an hour, and it shuts off automatically at 20 miles an hour as it goes through the process. And stage 3, in terms of the pedal assisted, those can go up to 28 miles an hour. And again, you have to be 16 years of age to use those. The other thing, drawing your attention to the second page of her remarks that I think is important, is that we're trying to avoid the piecemeal approach to doing all of this. We're looking for greater consistency for the market to grow. It's easier for our members who are retailers to be able to say, this is where you can ride the bike, this is where these are the characteristics of the bike. So it's very clear that these are bicycles, but these are the conditions to have this bicycle are set out in state law, so we know what's there. In the 4th paragraph on the 2nd page, she outlines the 36 states, if anyone is interested, in the states that have already passed the law, and it's obviously pending in other states. So one of the things we're looking at, and I need, as I close, is that this bill doesn't make any changes that are dramatic. It just allows for the electric bikes to be regulated. It also keeps us up to date with changes in technology. And finally, we think it's very important, we're very supportive of the amendments from the League of Kansas Municipalities that we worked out in this committee last year. We think that's important, that there's oversight, and if there's problems, it allows municipalities to take action to regulate them in any way possible. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I will conclude my remarks.
Are there questions for Mr. Robbins? Any questions online? Hearing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I believe you said you went through ash levels for her. Okay. Does anyone else wish to speak as a proponent? Hearing none, we'll move on to opponents. And I have Mr. David Everett, and he's remote. Welcome to the committee. Are you there, Mr. Everett? We can see you, Mr. Everett. You haven't got yourself muted, have you? Mr. Everett, can you hear me?
Okay, use this one. Use this.
Okay. I can hear you now.
Use this. So when it's your turn to talk, all you do is click on your deal.
Representative Jacobs, are you on? Representative Jacobs?
Yes, I'm on.
Okay. Mr. Everett asked if you would briefly cover his testimony, and everybody has it as written. If you could cover it a little bit, we would appreciate it if you would do that.
Okay. I have a little bit of his testimony.
Okay.
He
There are a number of pages. If you could summarize, that would be good.
I think the biggest summary of what I received in an email anyway is the biggest is to maybe reevaluate this law or these regulations and maybe not vote them in favorably. I think one of his questions is, and I hate to speak words into his mouth because I just have limited access on my phone right now. A better standard, he believes, would be the weight of the bike as it's sold. Limiting the weight would naturally limit the performance of the bike and keep harm at a minimum in case of accidents. Possibly around about 120 to 150 pounds seems reasonable to him. He puts down in his testimony that I have on an email that I printed off. I don't have access to my cell phone to actually, or my computer to actually look at the entirety of his personal testimony, so I won't be any help for that.
That's fine, Representative Jacobs. Everybody does have, here has access, or they will have access to the full testimony, as you will when you get to your computer. And I would ask that everybody take the time to, go through the testimony, and it's rather lengthy, several pages, but please take the time to go through that. And if you have any questions on his testimony, is his cell phone number, and you can reach him at that number, because I did when we were trying to solve our audio problem. Representative Jacobs, did you have anything else you wanted to comment on at this point in time?
Maybe not for this particular conferee, but for the gentleman previous, if that's okay. And
Sure.
I apologize for speaking out of turn.
Nope, no problem. He's at the podium.
Thank you, sir. The question, or one of the comments that I think I may have heard, that the audio kind of went out, was there a comment that we are trying to adopt European laws to coincide with American manufacturers? Is that something that I heard, or did I hear off of that?
No, what we're looking at is all the manufacturers around the world are looking for consistency. So when you buy electric bicycles, you're buying apples to apples. That's one of the things that we're looking at in terms of standards, the measurements, the speed, and everything else. So that's a true statement in the sense, but these have been adopted by the entire industry, as opposed to us adopting the metric system, for example. We're just trying to adopt for consistency, if that makes sense, Representative Jacobs.
Yes, sir. I do have a question when we're talking about speedometers on these class 3s. If they're only able to reach a maximum of 28 miles per hour, do we see even it necessary to put speedometers on those particular bikes in that class?
That's one of the things that was agreed upon by the manufacturers and the distributors as something they thought would be helpful. I'm not sure it's the end of the world one way or the other. One thing that I neglected to mention when I testified earlier that might help you in terms of speed, well, how fast is 20 miles an hour, 28 miles an hour? The University of Tennessee and some other research institutions went ahead and said, well, what's the difference between a regular bicycle riders? And they actually went in and measured. The difference between an electric bike on a street is about 1.5 miles faster than a regular bike. And on a walking trail or another trail, electric bike is a mile per hour slower than a regular bicycle, if that provides any context to the committee in terms of the speed issue and that sort of thing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Robinson.
Sure.
Representative Weigel.
Thank you. Gary, don't go away.
I was trying so hard.
I know you wanted to get away. When Representative Jacobs was asking something, and it kind of dawned on me, are these bicycles without the motor attached, are they about the same weight and configuration as just a regular, like a 10-speed Schwinn bike, something like that?
They are a little heavier. I've picked one up, at Southwind. There's a bicycle shop on the boulevard as you leave town. And they are a little bit heavier, but I couldn't tell you how much. And there's different types. There's some for, mountain bike type bikes, and there's in town. So those weigh a little differently in terms of, but I don't have any of the weight requirements. I'm sorry, I don't have any of that information, but they are a little heavier. But I couldn't tell you whether it's 10 pounds or 15 pounds.
Okay. And just one other thing that
Sure.
you just mentioned on speed, maybe I missed it. Can the operator, the rider, control the speed, or does once that motor kicks in, it just goes to that maximum speed?
So it goes to the maximum speed and it shuts off.
Okay.
So they shut off is the point. Now you can still keep pedaling on your own depending on your strength, but the bottom line is they shut off as a safety feature.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry, you're up there now. We got another question. Vice Chair Del
This was
Podang.
too good to be true. Just
Yeah, can you tell me what the normal battery voltage of these bicycles are? Is there
I
a scale?
can't, and I don't think I've got that with me. Let me look.
See it anywhere, but I didn't know
No, I don't have it in here. I'm sorry.
if it's volt or 24 volt or anything. But
If you're charging, I know Senator Peterson, the one he worked with for his father-in-law was simply something that is he just plugged them in, to 110 to charge it up, but I don't know anything specific than that.
I was just curious, on the other testimony here, they were pushing for a minimum of, looked like 2,000 watt. And I'm thinking if you got a 12 volt battery, that's a lot of amperage sitting
Yeah.
there pushing through. So,
Yeah, it's not that much, I'm sure.
thank you.
Yeah.
Further questions while we have him on the hot seat? Yes, Representative Ballard.
It's a roast.
Well, it is. One of the things you said about who could use it, some people would actually say this enables those with disabilities
Right.
to really get around without having to have assistance, especially if it's a short distance
Yes.
and everything else. And even though it's not mentioned, but I had a constituent that actually sent it, so please support this because that is how my dad and my mom are still able to get around. So I hadn't thought about that way, but I would add that because for that reason, I think, well, not just that reason, but it's multiple reasons why this could be beneficial.
Well, that's why a grandparent or someone with a health problem could go riding with their family where they wouldn't be able to do it otherwise. That's also a good illustration of your point.
This was a kind roast. How that?
You were very kind. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. Appreciate it. Does anyone else wish to speak as an opponent? Hearing none, we have one neutral testimony. Welcome to the committee. Wendy Stark, Research Associate, League of Municipalities. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee for allowing me, Wendy Stark with the League of Kansas Municipalities, to present testimony, neutral testimony on Senate Bill 101. And when the bill first came out, the League was opposed to the bill as written, and I want to thank the proponents for working with us to ensure that we were able to keep that local control. And specifically, it was by striking the language in section 9G 2 through 4 and replacing it with language that the league suggested, which recognizes home rule and local decision-making. There is one other issue that we would like to bring to the committee's attention, and that is that Class 3 electric assisted bicycles will be able to travel, as Mr. Robbins said, up to 28 miles per hour. Other states have made additional rules for this category, and we encourage the committee to consider how these should be treated under Kansas DUI laws. And as these bicycles will be allowed on any public road, it's probably an area that's worth further consideration if Senate Bill 101 is considered by the full House. And I'd be happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions for Ms. Stark?
Mr. Chair, Trevor Jacobs, please.
Yes, go ahead.
I heard from the previous conferee that if passing this would make it lawful to ride these. So is it against the law to ride these electric bikes as it sits now, or did I mishear?
This would provide the guidance. I do not know the answer to that question, but I believe this provides guidance for permitting. Actually, Mr. Robbins may know the answer to that question.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Shelley, would you like to answer? Or Mr. Wagner?
No, they're not currently illegal to ride. They're just differing definitions and what rules apply to them. So.
Okay, thank you. Representative Helgerson.
I think I voiced this last year, and I'll voice it again this year. Yesterday, I was out on the streets of Topeka, and a motorized vehicle went from one street to another, went from one curb to another, because we have now created a speed zone on the sidewalks where they go down and up and keep moving in a safer area than the streets, because we don't have bike paths. And this is going to create, and in Wichita, it happens all the time in downtown Wichita. This is going to create more and more hazards for drivers and other individuals, because we will have motorized bicycles that people can zip and buzz right through intersections. And we're not talking about it. In fact, we're eliminating the insurance on this. And these bikes, motorized, will be more dangerous than we realize. And I'm all in favor of having the motorized, but I don't think we've thought enough about how we're going to educate and police the drivers who can't ride on the city sidewalks. And right now, they're not being policed, and the police officers don't have any desire to do this. Nobody does. And I can count in Wichita alone, on a lunch hour, 3, 4, 5 individuals that'll do it. I can count downtown Topeka, even though it's fewer people, more people doing it. And motorized bicycles, as they'll become more common and more, they're fun to use. You don't have to use, for an old fart like me, they'll be great. But they'll also be more dangerous to the driver of the bicycle and to the cars, because you go across at 20 some miles an hour through through a crosswalk, drivers aren't prepared for that. So I hope that as this bill passes, someone will think about how we deal with that kind of a problem, so we can prevent some accidents.
Representative Francis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate the ranking minority member's comments, but as I understand this bill, it kind of sets a broad standardization across the state, and it allows local municipalities to pass the laws that are most appropriate for their community. For instance, Liberal would need one set of regulations possibly, and Wichita definitely would need another level of scrutiny as far as the rules of the road. Is that correct, Mr. Wagner?
Is your question that cities could regulate as they choose?
That's one question.
Yeah, that's correct. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just like bicycles, yeah, each city or county would be able to adopt ordinances governing the use of e-bikes on their roads.
And to follow up on that, is there any standardized rules if a municipality doesn't pass any rules for them to vary off of as far as the municipal code? Or I think there is for bicycles in there. You're supposed to be on the right and put your arm up this way or that.
Yeah. There are laws that apply to bicycles that will apply to e-bikes as they are now. Certain lighting requirements, requiring them to use a bicycle path if one's available. All of those will still apply to e-bikes if a city doesn't adopt an ordinance that goes beyond that.
Thank you.
Representative Delperdang.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too want to expound on it. I had questions up for, are they for use on roads only or the sidewalks? But I do see where in the bill it does say the subsection shall not be construed to prevent a city through exercising its home rule powers. So it does get into that. But when you get into, I'm going to call it DUI cases, because you had briefly mentioned it here. My understanding, if a person loses their license because of a DUI, or they can actually ride a gas-powered bike at this point if it's less than like 49 cc's, I believe. But I think there's some speed limits there, but I'm wondering when you get into the same thing with a Class C, is it going to be a much faster vehicle?
And currently, as this is written, it's not addressed in the legislation. So that's where we would ask the committee to consider where that should be, and we'd be happy to look at where maybe that could or should be addressed.
Okay. Because I am going to voice a concern. I've seen the individuals on the small gas-powered, whether it's mopeds or whatever you want to call it, but blowing from street to the sidewalks to in and out of people walking down there. And if you're doing close to 30 mile an hour, it's setting up an accident waiting to happen, so to speak. So, all right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Shelley, did you have a comment you wanted to make? Please feel free to do so.
Thank you, Jill Shelley, KLRD. A motorized bicycle is defined to have the capability of a maximum design speed of no more than 30 miles per hour. It also has 3.5 brake horsepower and a cylinder capacity of not more than 130 cubic centimeters.
Representative Ballard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to deviate a little bit. We've discussed golf carts before. What's the max speed on golf court? Golf? I can't even think carts.
She's looking. She'll be with you in a minute.
No, 'cause the reason I bring this up is because this sounds a lot like the conversation we had about golf carts, and may create maybe a similar scenario.
Mr. Wagner, did you have something?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The definition of a golf cart means a motor vehicle does not have fewer than 3 wheels in contact with the ground, weighs not more than 1,800 pounds, is designed to be operated not more than 25 miles per hour.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. I mean,
Representative Weigel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I didn't catch all of it. Is the definition of a motorized vehicle for these motorized bicycles the same as for a regular vehicle, more or less? Is that what you were saying, or did I catch that wrong?
A motorized bicycle is defined in terms of its horsepower, cylinder capacity, and maximum design speed of no more than 30 miles per hour. So it's meant to be an internal combustion engine.
Okay. It just comes to me that most local city jurisdictions have what's called STOs, which are standard traffic ordinances. And I'm assuming that anything that's motorized on the streets would be covered under those, correct?
We actually take the STO from the state statute. So that is, but so that provides guidance. If a city does not have their own ordinance, we take the state or.
Well, what I'm saying is the cities, the municipalities can write their own, whatever you want to call it, a standard traffic ordinance or whatever pertaining to those vehicles, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, does anyone else wish to speak as neutral? Hearing none, we'll close the hearing on Senate Bill 101 and open the hearing on House Bill 2478. Supervisor Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee, House Bill 2478 would designate a portion of U.S. Highway 166 in Sumner and Cowley counties as the Sergeant Evan S. Parker Memorial Highway. This highway will begin from the junction of US 166 with US 81 in Sumner County, and then go east to the western city limits of Arkansas City and Cowley County. Much like all the other highway dedications, the Secretary of Transportation must receive 150% of the sign costs for the initial cost and any maintenance or replacement of the sign. I'd stand for any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Wagner? Hearing none, thank you. I have one proponent listed, and it's Anita Dixon, mother of Sergeant Evan S. Parker, and she's speaking to us remotely. Welcome to the committee, Ms. Dixon.
Thank you very much. I hope all of you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Okay, I want to just say a huge thank you to all of you for allowing me as Evan's mother to speak on behalf of the House Bill 2478, the Sergeant Evan S. Parker Memorial Highway. Evan was a true American hero that gave the ultimate sacrifice for his country and our freedoms. He loved his military service, and he had his papers in order to make the military his career. And I believe Evan would say right now, it was my honor to serve my country. I want to quote Captain Thomas Cotton, which was an Army escort for the fallen service members that came from Iraq and Afghanistan. And he states, their story is of heroism, sacrifice, and patriotism, and to remind all of us what is best in ourselves. The Sergeant Evan S. Parker Memorial Highway will teach future generations what is best about the America that we live in. The sign will be a visual tool about remembrance, honor, and sacrifice. Thank you all.
Thank you, Ms. Dixon. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Representative Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Dixon, for that testimony. I just want to say thank you for your son, and thank you for your son's sacrifice and service to our country. We are all really grateful, my family and I especially. So thank you so much for your testimony today. And again, thank you for your son.
Thank you.
Seeing no further Questions? I would just have a comment that I will ditto the last remarks. We're honored to have you speak to us today. Does anyone
you
else? Sure. Does anyone else wish to speak as a proponent? Hearing none, I have no opponents or neutrals listed. Does anyone wish to speak as a neutral or an opponent? Hearing none, we'll close the hearing on House Bill 2478 and open the hearing on House Bill 2483. Supervisor Wagner, you're back up, man.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee House Bill 2483 would provide for the Daughters of the American Revolution distinctive license plate. It's a pretty standard distinctive license plate. The Daughters of the American Revolution would set a royalty fee between $25 and $100 that would either be paid to the county treasurer or directly to the organization, in which the organization would give them a logo use authorization statement to present to the treasurer upon registration. They are subject to license plate fees and the initial issuance requirement, which has since been decreased to initial issuance of 250 license plates. And also, the organization would be responsible for any design costs up to $5,000. And also design of the plate. And any royalty fees collected by sale of these plates would go into a designated royalty fund and be paid on a monthly basis to the Daughters of the American Revolution. And I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Are there any questions for the reviser? Representative Delperdang.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chris, can you tell us, have we run this bill previously? It just sounds awful familiar.
Not for this organization.
Not this specific bill.
No, but it's standard distinctive license plate that we had multiple versions of them last year. But yeah, they're pretty standard.
Thank you.
Just the organization's different.
Anyone else have a question? See none, thank you. One proponent I have is written testimony by Susan Metzger, State Regent, Kansas Society of Daughters of the American Revolution, Manhattan, Kansas. Committee, you have that before you. Does anyone else wish to speak as a proponent? Hearing none, I have no opponents or neutrals listed. Does anyone wish to speak as an opponent or neutral? Committee, you will find letters of support received from Karen R. Warner, Augusta, Kansas, Ellen F. Estes, Gina Rice, Wichita, Kansas, and Elizabeth Winterborn of Wichita. Does anyone have any questions on this particular bill at this point? Yes, Representative Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had a general question. Where are the distinctive license plates manufactured or, I can't remember from last year, so.
Representative Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Howe. I do know the answer to this question because they're manufactured in the 97th District, right down the street from my house at Center Industries. So great organization. If I may, great company. About 50% of their workforce is part of the IDD community. So it's a great program. And if you're ever in the Wichita area and would like a tour, the license plates are just part of their business. They also manufacture a wide range of things. So if you're ever in the Wichita area and want a tour, please let me know.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Hoheisel. Thank you.
Representative Hoheisel, you will be receiving a bill for advertising. But I don't blame you. That was a good point. Hearing nothing else, we'll close the hearing on House Bill 2483. Committee, at this point in time, we still are scheduled for tomorrow. My understanding is the Senate has recessed until Monday. Please look at your emails. We will notify you as soon as we hear of anything. If we're going to be here, if we're not going to be here, we will let you know. And hopefully it's shortly after 3, and we'll be able to get you an answer. So with no further to come before the committee, we are adjourned.